The first thing Lyra noticed when she stepped into Aurora's studio wasn't the glass walls, the neon glow, or the rows of high-end computers. It was the silence. Not the absence of noise. Keyboards clicked, machines hummed, someone's headphones leaked distorted bass, but the silence of imagination. Aurora had once been a titan in the gaming industry. A name whispered in forums, respected at conventions, feared by its competitors. But now, walking through the corridors, Lyra felt it, the weight of a place stuck in time. Posters of old games hung on the walls, their colors faded. Trophies collected dust in glass cabinets. It was a company surviving on memory, not momentum. And here she was, Lyra Valen, 24, hair dyed a soft ocean blue that shimmered under the fluorescent lights, thin silver-framed glasses perched on her nose. To most, she looked like another junior artist, untested, maybe too eccentric for her own good. But to her, Aurora was not a dream job. It was a battlefield waiting for a spark. Her first week was spent learning the ropes, being ushered into meetings where her ideas were politely ignored, sitting at her workstation while the veterans whispered behind her back. They didn't say it to her face, but she could feel it. Why is she here? Why did Adrian bring her in? One evening, long after most had gone home, Lyra stayed behind. She opened the archives on her workstation, a labyrinth of folders filled with unfinished concepts and abandoned prototypes. Aurora had a habit of burying its failures instead of learning from them. And then she saw it. A project folder labeled Eclipse, Legacy Build. Curiosity sparked. She clicked. The screen filled with half-rendered worlds, fractured cities, character models frozen mid-pose, environments stuck between brilliance and incompletion. It was haunting, like walking through a ghost town where ideas had died. But beneath the dust of neglect, Lyra saw something no one else had: potential. The project had been shelved 5 years ago after the studio deemed it too ambitious. Its concepts were raw, unstable, but breathtaking. Towering cities of glass suspended over oceans, enemies sculpted with surrealist edges, landscapes that looked more like dreams than levels. Her pulse quickened. She took off her glasses, rubbed her eyes, then leaned closer to the screen. This isn't dead. It's just waiting. With her stylus, she began sketching. Not from scratch, but through the broken architecture of Eclipse. She reimagined the fractured towers, turning them into a metropolis of memory and light. She breathed life into the unfinished creatures, giving them anatomy that pulsed with strange bioluminescence. Every stroke was rebellion, against Aurora's stagnation, against the politics of her department, against the quiet disdain of Marcus Hale. Hours passed unnoticed. By the time she stopped, the office was dark except for her glowing monitor. On the screen was no longer an abandoned project. It was something new, something alive. She leaned back, exhaling sharply. If they see this, they'll think I'm insane. Or worse, naive. But she couldn't stop herself. The next day, during the weekly department sync, Marcus Hale strode into the conference room like a general surveying his troops. Crisp suit, silver watch, a permanent scowl etched into his face. His presence alone silenced the chatter. Status updates, he said flatly, scanning the room. The senior designers rattled off progress on various assets. Ethan, with his sharp jawline and smug smile, presented his latest character designs. Safe, marketable, predictable. Marcus nodded approvingly. When it was Lyra's turn, she hesitated. Her sketchpad trembled slightly in her hand. She hadn't planned to share it, not yet, but something in her rebelled against the suffocating sameness of the room. I've been reviewing some of the archive projects, she began. Her voice was calm, but her heart pounded. There was one, Eclipse. It was shelved years ago. But I think it has unrealized potential. I tried reworking it, and... She placed her sketchpad on the table and slid it forward. The room fell silent. On the pages were visions unlike anything Aurora had produced in years. A city sculpted from fractured memories, glowing with impossible colors. Creatures that looked both terrifying and majestic, as if born from forgotten myths. A world that wasn't safe, wasn't market-tested, but was alive with imagination. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Ethan smirked. "This isn't your assignment," Marcus said, his tone sharp as broken glass. "We don't waste time digging through corpses of failed projects." Lyra met his gaze. Behind her glasses, her eyes burned. "Maybe Aurora failed it because the studio wasn't ready. But now we are. We just forgot how to take risks." The room shifted uncomfortably. No one talked to Marcus that way. Ethan's smirk faltered. Marcus leaned back, expression cold. "Ambition is not a substitute for discipline. Remember your place, Ms. Valen." But then, another voice cut through the tension. Adrian Cross, the new creative director, who had been silent until now, leaned forward, studying her sketches with an intensity that unsettled the room. His voice was quiet, deliberate. "This," he said, tapping a finger against her drawings, "is exactly the kind of thinking Aurora has forgotten how to nurture." The silence turned electric. Lyra sat frozen, her sketchpad still under his hand. For the first time, she realized her rebellion hadn't gone unnoticed. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. The announcement came on a Monday morning, when the entire studio was herded into the largest conference room. The air buzzed with a strange tension, half dread, half anticipation. Lyra sat near the back, notebook in hand, her ocean blue hair pulled into a loose bun, silver glasses reflecting the projector's glow. She'd heard whispers all week, something big was coming. Something that could either save Aurora's studio or finally sink it. Adrian Cross stepped to the front. He wasn't like Marcus, who commanded silence with scowls and hierarchy. Adrian had a presence that demanded attention without effort. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, tie absent, eyes bright with restless energy. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice calm yet cutting through the murmur like a blade, "Aurora has been treading water for too long. Our last 3 titles were serviceable. Market safe. But safe isn't survival anymore." A hush spread. Everyone knew the truth, but few dared speak it aloud. Adrian clicked the remote, and the screen behind him lit up with a single title card, Chrono Rebirth. The logo shimmered, an hourglass fracturing into shards of light, caught between collapse and renewal. "This," Adrian continued, "is our chance. A world-spanning RPG built on themes of memory, time, and rebirth. Our most ambitious project in a decade. It will either make us, or break us." Gasps and low whispers rippled through the room. Lyra leaned forward, heart hammering. The words memory and rebirth resonated with her eclipse sketches, as if fate had aligned. Marcus, seated with arms crossed near the front, didn't look impressed. His jaw tightened at every word. Ethan lounged beside him, smirking as if the game were already his playground. Adrian let the murmurs settle before delivering the blow. "And for this project," he said, eyes scanning the room, "we'll need a new artistic direction. A voice not bound by the past." His gaze fell on Lyra. "Lyra Valen will be our lead concept artist for the memory worlds." The room froze. Lyra blinked behind her glasses, unsure she'd heard correctly. "Led? Her?" She had been here barely 2 weeks. She was the outsider, the newcomer. Her mind spun, adrenaline rushing through her veins. Around her, whispers sharpened into daggers. "Is he serious? She's just a rookie. This is insane." At the front, Marcus's lips pressed into a thin line. Ethan's smirk evaporated, replaced by a flash of disbelief. Lyra swallowed hard, rising from her seat as Adrian gestured for her to come forward. Her hands trembled slightly as she carried her sketchpad to the projector stand. Adrian spoke again, "I saw something in her work last week, something we've been missing for years. Fearless imagination. The memory worlds will define this game, and she will define them." Marcus finally broke his silence. "With respect, Adrian," he said, his voice smooth but cold. Assigning the most critical component of a flagship project to an untested newcomer is reckless. We have veterans with years of experience, Ethan, for example, who could ensure stability. Ethan straightened, nodding subtly, basking in the implied endorsement. But Adrian didn't flinch. His eyes stayed locked on Marcus, sharp as steel. Experience without vision is stagnation. And stagnation is what nearly buried this company. Lyra stays. The declaration landed like a hammer. Lyra's heart pounded as she flipped open her sketchpad. With shaky hands, she placed it under the projector lens. The room filled with the sketches she had refined, luminous cities woven from fractured memories, surreal landscapes bleeding into dreamscapes, figures half shadow, half light. Gasps escaped the audience again, not all in admiration. Some were astonished, others unsettled. "This is," someone whispered, "different." "Too different," another muttered. Marcus's expression remained carved from stone, but his fingers tapped against the table in restrained fury. Ethan leaned toward him, voice low but audible to those nearby, "She won't last a month." Lyra spoke, her voice steadier than she expected. "Aurora's been chasing formulas for too long. Chrono Rebirth deserves more than recycled designs. It deserves to feel alive, like memory itself, fractured but luminous." For a moment, silence. Then Adrian nodded. "Exactly." The meeting adjourned soon after, but the damage, or the spark, had been done. Lyra walked back to her desk, adrenaline still coursing. She felt both elated and terrified. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. For the first time, she had been given a voice. But as she passed Marcus, she caught the glint in his eyes. Not respect. Not even anger. It was calculation. And when she glanced at Ethan, the smirk had returned, colder, sharper. Lyra understood then, this wasn't just an opportunity. It was a trap. Her rise had just begun, but so had their war. The glow of her promotion hadn't even settled before the shadows began to sharpen. By midweek, Lyra noticed the shift. The stares from her coworkers weren't just curious anymore, they were suspicious. Some avoided eye contact, others whispered as she passed. The studio, once indifferent to her presence, now bristled with unspoken hostility. And at the center of it all stood Marcus Hale. Marcus had ruled Aurora's art department for nearly a decade. His authority was absolute, his word treated as law. He wasn't flamboyant like Ethan, nor overtly cruel. His weapon was silence, the kind that made others second-guess themselves, shrink in their seats, and doubt their own worth. Now, Lyra was a crack in his fortress. The first confrontation came in the Tuesday design review. The team gathered in the sleek glass conference room, concept boards spread across the walls. Ethan lounged in his chair, arms folded, a smirk etched across his face. Marcus stood at the head of the table, his presence heavy, his silver watch gleaming under the lights. "Let's begin," Marcus said, scanning the room with practiced detachment. "Lyra, since you've been entrusted with the memory worlds, let's see what you've conjured." The word entrusted dripped with disdain. Lyra's hands tightened around her sketchpad, but she rose. She projected her latest concepts, an ethereal forest where memories grew like crystalline fruit, a cathedral of fractured glass where time itself seemed suspended, creatures woven from fragments of forgotten dreams. The room fell silent. A few junior artists exchanged odd glances, though none dared speak. Then Marcus struck. "This is indulgent," he said flatly, pointing at the crystalline forest. "Pretty, but utterly impractical for gameplay. Have you considered how the player navigates such chaos?" Lyra steadied her voice. "The forest isn't meant to be navigated in a conventional way. It's designed to disorient, to feel like stepping into a memory you can't quite control. That's the point." Marcus's jaw tightened. He moved to the cathedral design. "And this? It looks like shattered glass. What happens when this becomes a performance nightmare? Do you expect us to waste resources rendering something that exists purely for your artistic whim?" The words sliced deep, but Lyra didn't flinch. She adjusted her glasses, her gaze direct. It's not whim. It's vision. If players are supposed to relive memories, the environments should feel unstable, fragile. A polished, predictable world would betray the concept. The silence was sharp, like the whole room had stopped breathing. Ethan chuckled low, breaking the tension. Spoken like someone who's never shipped a game. You think vision pays the bills? You think players care about metaphors when they're grinding for loot? Laughter rippled from a few of his allies. Lyra's face heated, but she forced herself not to look away. Marcus raised a hand, silencing the room. Enough. Miss Valen, Aurora is not an art school. We don't deal in daydreams. We deal in deliverables. If you want to survive here, learn the difference. Her chest tightened, fury and humiliation boiling inside. But before she could respond, Adrian spoke from the far end of the table. Marcus, Adrian said, his tone deceptively calm, creativity is not indulgence. It's risk. Without it, we're nothing but a factory churning out clones. Marcus's head snapped toward him. For the first time, the mask slipped, and anger flickered in his eyes. And without discipline, we're a graveyard of failed experiments. The two men stared each other down, the tension electric. Lyra realized then, she wasn't just fighting Marcus. She was caught between two titans, Adrian, the visionary, and Marcus, the gatekeeper of tradition. The meeting ended with no resolution, but the damage was done. When Lyra returned to her desk, her inbox pinged with a revised task list. Her deliverables had doubled overnight, unrealistic deadlines, redundant revisions, a maze of bureaucracy designed to break her. It was Marcus's message, clear as ink, I control the battlefield. Later that evening, as the office emptied and the neon glow dimmed, Lyra stayed behind, staring at her screen. Every new obstacle felt like a stone stacked on her chest. She could almost hear Marcus's voice, know your place. But instead of giving in, she opened a fresh canvas. Her stylus hovered, trembling only for a second before it pressed down. If Marcus wanted to bury her under tasks, she would carve through them with sharper ideas. If Ethan wanted to laugh, she would silence him with worlds he could never imagine. As colors spread across the screen, she whispered under her breath, barely audible. Let's see how long your walls hold, Marcus. If Marcus was the silent weight pressing down on her, Ethan was the fire that burned in plain sight. Ethan had been Aurora's golden boy for years. His designs were on posters, his name whispered with admiration by interns, his swagger impossible to ignore. But in recent years, his work had slipped into routine, competent, marketable, safe. He knew it, though he'd never admit it aloud. And now, Lyra's arrival threatened to expose what he feared most, that his brilliance was fading. The confrontation began not in a conference room, but on the open floor. Lyra sat at her workstation, lost in a flurry of strokes across her digital canvas. She was sculpting a memory world unlike anything Aurora had attempted before, an endless ocean made of broken mirrors, each wave reflecting fragments of forgotten lives. Her stylus moved with confidence, her blue hair falling loose across her face, glasses catching the glow of the screen. Impressive. The words slid over her shoulder like a knife. Ethan leaned against the divider, arms crossed, a mocking smile twisting his lips. A few nearby artists looked up, already sensing a show. Lyra didn't glance at him. Do you need something? He chuckled. Just curious. How's it feel, being handed the biggest project in the studio while the rest of us actually earned our stripes? Lyra finally turned, meeting his eyes. I wasn't handed anything. I was trusted. There's a difference. The smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. Trusted? You've been here what, 2 weeks? You think that makes you qualified to shape the identity of Chrono Rebirth? Don't kid yourself. Her jaw tightened. If you have a problem with my work, critique it. Don't waste my time with jealousy. Gasps rippled across the floor. A few heads turned, whispers spreading like sparks. Ethan's smirk faltered, his pride wounded in front of an audience. "Oh, I'll critique it," he said, stepping closer. He reached for his tablet, pulling up her mirrored ocean design, projecting it onto the shared monitor for everyone nearby to see. "Look at this," he said loudly, gesturing dramatically. "An environment made of mirrors? Gorgeous, sure. But it's unplayable. How's the player supposed to orient themselves? How do we handle rendering costs? This isn't vision, it's amateur fantasy." Laughter trickled from his allies, but it was nervous, uncertain. Lyra stood, sliding her glasses up the bridge of her nose. Her voice was steady, cutting through the noise. "You think players only care about mechanics? You're wrong. They care about feeling. They want worlds that haunt them, stay with them after the console is off. If you can't see that, maybe it's not my design that's outdated." The words landed like a blade. The room went silent. Ethan's face darkened, his smile collapsing into a snarl. For a moment, it looked like he might lash out further, but then Marcus appeared at the edge of the floor. His gaze lingered on the monitor, then on Lyra. "Enough," Marcus said coldly. "Valen, I expect you to run your ideas through proper channels before grandstanding on the floor. Ethan, get back to work." The crowd dispersed reluctantly, tension still buzzing in the air. Ethan shot Lyra one last glare before stalking off, jaw clenched, pride bleeding from every step. Lyra sat back down, her heart pounding, hands trembling slightly. She had stood her ground, but she knew what this meant. Ethan wouldn't forget the humiliation. He would come back harder, sharper, and with Marcus on his side. Still, as her screen lit up again with the mirrored ocean, she felt a flicker of defiance. The more they tried to break her, the more determined she became. Later that night, when the office was nearly empty, Lyra caught sight of Ethan through the glass walls of a side room. He was hunched over his desk, whispering furiously with Marcus. His gestures were sharp, angry, while Marcus remained still, his face unreadable. She didn't need to hear the words. She knew the conversation's shape. Plans. Retaliation. The beginning of something darker. Lyra exhaled slowly, returning to her desk. She opened a new canvas, her stylus pressing harder than usual. If Ethan was Aurora's fading star, she would be the comet that burned brighter, faster, unstoppable. And if Marcus wanted to make her a pawn in his power games, well, then she'd become the piece that overturned the whole board. The war wasn't looming anymore. It had begun. The weekly executive review was never friendly, but this time the air felt like glass about to shatter. Lyra sat at the long table, her sketchpad closed in front of her, heart pounding so loudly she thought the others might hear it. Around her, senior designers shuffled papers, whispered, exchanged glances. Marcus stood at the head, his suit immaculate, his presence heavy. Ethan lounged nearby, eyes sharp and waiting. Adrian Cross sat at the far end. Calm, unreadable. The meeting began with routine updates, textures finalized, models approved, revisions submitted. But everyone knew where the storm would land. "Next," Marcus said finally, his tone clipped. His eyes flicked to Lyra. "The so-called memory worlds." The room stilled. Lyra rose, sliding her glasses higher on her nose. With trembling hands she placed her latest designs under the projector. The screen filled with her visions, a labyrinth of glowing glass corridors where memories flickered like trapped fireflies, a cliffside city suspended in midair, its buildings woven from half-forgotten dreams. Gasps rippled around the table. Even the veterans couldn't hide their awe. Then Marcus spoke, slicing the moment in half. "Excessive," he said. "Unstable. These are not environments, they're distractions. How is a player supposed to orient themselves in this chaos?" Ethan leaned forward, smirking. "It's art school nonsense, Marcus. Pretty, but pointless. Gameplay comes first. Always." A few voices murmured agreement. The weight of the department pressed against her. Lyra steadied herself. The memory worlds aren't supposed to feel stable. They're fractured, like memory itself. They should be overwhelming. That's how players feel the story, not just see it. Ethan laughed. Players don't care about feelings. They care about mechanics, rewards, systems that keep them grinding. You think they'll stop and cry over reflections in a wall? The words stung, but Lyra didn't flinch. She held her ground. Maybe they don't cry, Ethan. But they remember. And isn't that the point? Games that stay with you after you put the controller down. For a second, silence. Some junior artists exchanged furtive glances. There was something in her words that rang true, even if no one dared say it. Marcus slammed the moment shut. Vision without discipline is indulgence. Aurora cannot afford indulgence. We are not here to gamble the studio's future on untested whims. Lyra's chest tightened. She opened her mouth to answer, but before she could, Adrian's voice cut through the tension. Marcus. The room froze. Adrian leaned forward, elbows on the table, his eyes fixed not on Marcus but on Lyra's projected sketches. His voice was calm, deliberate, but carried an authority that shifted the atmosphere instantly. This, he said, gesturing to her designs, is not indulgence. This is the spark Aurora has been missing. The risk. The soul. For years we've played it safe, and we nearly died for it. These worlds, they are exactly the kind of rebirth this project demands. Gasps. Whispers. Ethan's smirk vanished. Marcus's eyes narrowed. With respect, Adrian, you're mistaking spectacle for substance. I've kept this department alive by rejecting fantasies that waste our resources. And I'll reject this one too. Adrian turned his gaze on Marcus, unblinking. No, Marcus. You've kept this department alive by choking it. By recycling, reusing, and retreating from anything that scared you. That ends today. The words landed like a blade. For the first time in years, Marcus was openly challenged in his own territory. His face remained controlled, but a muscle twitched at his jawline. Lyra stood frozen, her sketches still glowing on the screen. She had expected dismissal, ridicule, perhaps even humiliation. She hadn't expected this. Adrian continued, his tone sharper now. Aurora doesn't need more of the same. It needs visionaries. It needs people like Lyra, who aren't afraid to push past the safe and into the unforgettable. Every eye in the room turned toward her. Some glared with envy, others with skepticism. But for the first time, Lyra felt the weight shift, not crushing her, but lifting. Marcus finally spoke, his voice low and tight. So you'd risk the studio's survival on the unproven instincts of a child? Adrian leaned back, his expression calm but unyielding. I'd rather risk it on someone brave than waste it on someone afraid. The silence that followed was deafening. When the meeting adjourned, people filed out quickly, whispering. Marcus remained behind, his stare burning holes into Lyra as she gathered her things. Ethan brushed past her with a muttered curse, his pride shattered by Adrian's open dismissal. Lyra clutched her sketchpad to her chest, heart racing. She knew this victory wasn't safe. Adrian's words had elevated her, but they had also painted a target on her back. As she walked out of the room, she caught Marcus's expression one last time. Calm. Cold. Calculating. And in that gaze she understood, he would not forgive this. She had won a battle. But Marcus, and Ethan, were already preparing for war. The studio buzzed with anticipation. Word had spread quickly, Lyra was about to present her most ambitious design yet. In the main conference room, the projector hummed to life. Lyra stood at the front, fingers tightening around her stylus. Her sketches glowed on the screen, visions of a sprawling city built from fractured beams of light, suspended above a sea of shifting memories. Towers shimmered like prisms, reflecting fragments of lives long forgotten. Streets bent and twisted, leading nowhere and everywhere at once. It was surreal, dreamlike, both breathtaking and unsettling. This, Lyra said, her voice steady despite the weight pressing on her chest, is the City of Light. It represents memory itself, fragile, luminous, unstable. Every structure, every reflection is drawn from the player's past choices. It's not just a setting. It's a mirror of who they are becoming in the game. For a moment, the room was silent. A hushed awe rippled across the junior designers. Some leaned forward, eyes wide, captivated. Then the sharp voice of Cassandra Lowe, head of Aurora's commercial division, cut through the quiet. This won't sell. The spell shattered. Lyra blinked, as Cassandra rose from her seat, her tailored blazer sharp as her words. It's too abstract. Too strange. Players don't want to wander around some art installation, they want clear objectives, recognizable environments. Castles. Cities. Forests. Not this. Marcus smirked from across the table, satisfied. Ethan leaned back, arms crossed, enjoying the spectacle. Lyra's pulse quickened. With respect, Cassandra, safe environments are exactly what's killing Aurora. The City of Light isn't just scenery, it's an emotional experience. Players will remember it long after they leave the game. Isn't that the kind of impact we want? Cassandra's eyes narrowed. Impact doesn't pay the bills. Marketability does. Do you think posters of fractured skyscrapers will sell copies in Tokyo or Los Angeles? Do you think casual players will even understand what this is supposed to be? Her words struck hard. Murmurs filled the room, colleagues shifting uncomfortably. Lyra forced herself not to falter. If we keep catering only to what's safe, we'll never grow. Games aren't just products, they're worlds. If we don't take risks, Aurora will remain irrelevant. Cassandra scoffed. Spoken like someone who's never watched quarterly numbers bleed red. Risk doesn't save studios. Revenue does. The clash sharpened, the room dividing into silent camps, creatives leaning toward Lyra, executives toward Cassandra. Marcus remained still, but his faint smile revealed his delight. Let the girl dig her own grave. Adrian finally broke his silence. Cassandra, he said calmly, sometimes what sells isn't what people expect, but what they didn't know they needed. Lyra's vision could redefine Aurora's identity. Cassandra snapped back, or it could bankrupt us. Are you willing to stake the studio's future on a gamble? Adrian didn't flinch. I'm willing to stake it on imagination. The words hung in the air, defiant, unyielding. Lyra felt a rush of gratitude, but also fear. She wasn't naive, she knew Cassandra wasn't wrong. The risk was enormous. But so was the chance to make history. Marcus finally spoke, his voice smooth and venomous. Perhaps we're overlooking a compromise. Let Valen keep her artistry. But let's also prepare a safer fallback. Ethan can lead a parallel design, something familiar, something marketable. Then the executives can choose which direction to pursue. Ethan's grin widened, predatory. Lyra's stomach dropped. Marcus wasn't just undermining her, he was setting her up to compete directly against Ethan, on a stage where politics mattered more than creativity. Adrian's jaw tightened. We don't need two directions. We need one. And I choose this. He gestured toward Lyra's luminous city, glowing across the screen. The room erupted in whispers, outrage, disbelief. Cassandra folded her arms, glaring. Marcus's smile vanished, though his eyes gleamed with calculation. Ethan's fists clenched under the table. Lyra stood frozen, her sketches still projected in all their fragile brilliance. Part of her wanted to shrink under the weight of opposition, to apologize, to make it easier. But another part, the part that had stayed up night after night drawing these impossible visions, refused. She met Cassandra's stare and spoke clearly. I didn't come to Aurora to make something safe. I came here to make something unforgettable. The room fell into stunned silence. When the meeting ended, People filed out quickly, some shaking their heads, others stealing glances at her as if she were reckless, dangerous, even doomed. But Adrian lingered, stepping close enough for only her to hear. His voice was low, certain. Don't back down. You've started something bigger than this room. Lyra nodded, her chest tight with both fear and fire. She knew she had just crossed a line. And there was no turning back.
Part 2 is still on the channel. Please watch and follow.